Hello, everybody. I'm Mr. Wildcat. Hope you all having a wonderful day today. Today, we are doing a special episode today. It is to pay a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II, who had passed away the other day at the age of 96 and had been the Queen of England for more than 70 years, dating back to 1952. It's not just the United Kingdom that she was the head of monarch for. There's a whole bunch of different commonwealths throughout the world in which Queen Elizabeth II was also in charge of as well. Okay, some of which are still under Commonwealth ownership by the United Kingdom, and others she had basically had run at one point or another during her regime, but no longer in effect. So here is a list of countries that Queen Elizabeth II was also the queen of as of her passing in 2022. So here we go: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Grenada, Papua, de, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis. Okay. And then here's a list of other countries which she had been queen of at one point or another during her regime, but no longer. Okay. These countries include Pakistan, South Africa, Ceylon, Hong Kong, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Trinidad and Tobago, Uganda, Kenya, Malawi, Malta, the Gambia, Guyana, Barbados, Mauritius, and Fiji. Let me tell you guys something. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in geography. Okay, that was my degree at the University of Arizona. I should know where every one of these fucking countries are. Yet, the ironic part is, I never even heard of some of these countries, nor would I know where they are. Okay, I can definitely tell you that. Okay, one thing I could definitely tell you, Guyana. Okay, for the longest time I thought that was in Africa. No, it's in South America next to Venezuela. That's where Jonestown was located. Anybody notice the Jonestown cult, where Jim Jones of the People's Temple wind up murdering 900 people with cyanide-laced Kool-Aid? Such a shame. All right, but that's where that was. I know that Hong Kong, she'd been the Queen of Hong Kong because Hong Kong had been under British rule until 1997 when that got transferred over to China. Okay, so the Queen was in charge of that until then. One more thing I will say about the Queen before we dig into this episode. Okay, in 1987, some British film company they were making a film that wound up winning Best Picture called The Last Emperor. It was about Pu Yi, who was the last emperor of China, and he wound up dying in 1967. And basically, the film was filmed on location in China's Forbidden City. It was the first and one of the only Western films to be filmed in China's Forbidden City since China's communist takeover in 1949. Now here's where it gets interesting. Okay, this was in 1987 when this film was released. During the film's production in 1987, Queen Elizabeth II was scheduled to make a visit to China. And while she was there, she wanted to tour the Forbidden City. But unfortunately, she was denied access to the Forbidden City because the production of The Last Emperor was given top priority. The fuck, China? Oh well. Now we got that out of the way. Today we are going to be reviewing the three-part episode, The England Show. We're going to review all three episodes at the same time. We're going to dig right into it, and I'm going to give you, at the end of each part, I'm going to give you a little bit of trivia from each part, and then at the very end of the third part, I'm going to give you one unified rating for the entire three-part episode together. Okay? This three-part episode altogether serves as the season finale for season 6. Okay? So let's start digging into it. Okay? Part 1, was taped on March 30th, 1992, and originally aired on May 3rd. Okay? We have a wide variety of additional cast members that you're going to see in this episode, and these are all British natives, might I add. So, we start off in 1653 in a fictional town called Lower Uncton, England. Okay, yes, it is fictional. I've tried looking this place up on Google. It doesn't exist. Okay? Seamus McBundy is making horseshoes. This lady comes in and asks him to hurry up on her order. And he keeps sitting there making fat jokes for her. This lady turns out to be a witch. Okay? As punishment for the way that he had treated her, Lower Uncton will remain in eternal darkness until every one of the male Bundy descendants has passed. In addition to that, Bundys are cursed with smelly feet for their entire lives. And coincidentally, all these Bundys that they wound up finding over the years turned out to have worked at the local shoe store. Okay? We fast forward 339 years later to 1992, which is the present day at the time of this episode. There is a town meeting in Lower Uncton, England, where Winston, the town's historian, has basically announced that they have searched far and wide and spent all their money to try to lift the curse. They basically, every male Bundy has to be killed in Lower Uncton in order for this curse to be lifted. They wind up searching far and wide, and every single place where they find a Bundy, it was easy. All they had to do was go to the local shoe store. And they have found, after all of their ravaging, by 1992, they have found that only 2 male Bundys still survive. Al and his son Bud, both of which range from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States of America. Okay? So these two, in order for the curse to be lifted, these two have to be killed in the vicinity of Lower Uncton. So they're trying to find a way to lure these two to town so that the curse can be lifted. So what they do is they send a letter to the Bundy household. The Bundy family has won a all expense paid trip to England. All right? Now they wind up using the phrase all expense paid in order to lure them out to England. Now, unfortunately, this is going to backfire on Winston and the town of Lower Uncton, because you know how the Bundys are. So we'll get to that later on down the road. All right, so they're all excited, and they wind up winning. It is very bizarre, very suspicious. Like if I was the Bundys, I would if I had won a free trip, I would have been a little suspicious. But especially with the way that they won it, they said that they'd placed the names of every person in a hat, like the whole worldwide population. Their names were put into a hat, and the Bundys were the lucky ones to be picked. This doesn't make any sense. At the time of this episode, there were about 5.5 billion people in the world. The world hit the 5 billion person mark in 1987, and it hit the 6 billion mark in 1999-2000. And as of right now, from my understanding, there's about 7.5 billion people in the world. Okay, soon to be 8 billion. All right, where are you going to find a hat big enough to put billions of people's names in a hat? It doesn't make any sense. Nevertheless, it's a free trip. They're not going to complain. The Darcys come in, and Jefferson has announced that he has bought tickets to Epcot Center, where he's going to take Marcy with him, okay, on vacation, out of his pocket, of course. And then they find out that the bunnies are going to England. Okay, Marcy is upset that they're going to England and we're going to go into the swamps of Florida. No, I'm going to England too. Marcy insists on going to England. And you know how they're going to pay for it? Marcy's going to sell Jefferson's car, which Jefferson understandably rejects to because he had earned that car through certain sexual favors. So anyway, we're on this plane to England. The pilot says, "Will the passenger in this seat please put your shoes back on? I'm choking to death." And Al says, "Oh, come on. They show us the film Dutch, and they say I suck." Dutch, coincidentally, was a film starring Ed O'Neill in 1991, and the film literally failed at the box office. All right, we will get into it a little bit later on. But then we wind up at the London's Heathrow Airport, all right, where Winston and Igor from Lower Uncton are sitting there waiting for the male Bundys. Okay, then right behind, there's also like signs for like Moyer and Levitt, which are references to the names of the show's creators, Michael Moyer and Ron Levitt. But we'll get to that in a minute. But basically, Winston comes up and notices the Bundys and says, and he wants to confirm that they are the only male Bundys remaining. Winston insists on taking the Bundys to Lower Uncton immediately, but no. The Bundys are on an all-expense paid trip to England. They want to sightsee in the city. They want to see London. Okay? So Winston is very reluctant because this is, okay, he wants the Bundys killed immediately, but they are not willing to go to Uncton just yet. So they want to go sightseeing, all right? Marcy and Jefferson, they're sitting there in the airport. They're not paying attention. They're basically talking to each other. Winston and Igor, they put the Darcy's luggage into the Bundy's vehicle, and they take off while Marcy and Jefferson are just sitting there talking. Okay? And unfortunately, they can't afford a taxi to follow them because all of their money is in their luggage. They also can't go back. Okay? Their money, their return tickets home, their passports, they're all in the luggage. So they can't go nowhere. Okay? So, the Bundys go on a sightsee tour. Winston basically shows them the famous parts of London. All right? And you know how the Bundys enthusiastically are. Okay? So we start off with St. Paul's Cathedral. Great. Parliament. Great. Tower Bridge. Great. Trafalgar Square. Great. Buckingham Palace. Great. Hey, Dad, look, McDonald's. Peg, get the camera. Now they're not too thrilled about the famous London landmarks, but when you see a McDonald's, pull out the camera. Hey, we found a McDonald's in England. Bundy's. Let me explain something to you. All right, if you are going to go if you're going to go on vacation, You, I would be excited to see. Okay, I would focus mainly on the scenes and like the sites, the landmarks, attractions, the restaurants and stuff that you would not find back home in Chicago. McDonald's is one of those things you should not be too thrilled about. Okay, they're probably thrilled. Hey, we have McDonald's back in the States. Focus on the other stuff. Like, what's the big deal? They did forget to mention Big Ben. That's the big tower clock. Okay, so they finished. So the Bundys, they wind up stopping. So Vincent winds up stopping uh, on some random street in London, and Peggy comes out of the car. We wind up seeing a Harrods department store. Okay, it's probably one of those upper scale stores and stuff. Peggy smells women shopping, and she wants to go shopping herself. Okay, she asks Winston if there's some time for a little bit of shopping. Okay. There's a little bit of time for that. Bud and Kelly ask if they can do some shopping too. I said, if there's time. They go in and then they come back out. They want to fill in a whole trunk load full of merchandise, all for Peggy. Okay? What even happened to for Christ's sake, like what even happened to their luggage? Okay, I thought they had luggage in there for Christ's sakes. Okay? And of course, this is all on Winston's dime because all expense paid, remember? Then after they load up the trunk full of stuff, says, no time, let's go. All right. Then we wind up, we have one of those double-deck buses. Okay, England is famous for these double-deck buses, they're two-story level buses. You will not find these in the United States. Okay, many bridges and stuff they're not big enough to handle these types of vehicles. But basically, you have Marcy that's riding on the bus, and Jefferson is forced to run behind the bus. Okay, and Marcy basically says, as no, Jefferson asks if he can ride for a while, and no. This is Jefferson's punishment for what he did. You put the money in the luggage. They drove off with our luggage. Okay? This is your fault. We only had enough money for one ticket. So as punishment for what you did to us, you're the one who's running behind. Okay? The bus takes off again, and then Jefferson is running behind again. We then head off to Buckingham Palace, where I think it's we don't know. I believe it's Buckingham Palace because you have one of those British guards with the long black hat and the helmet and stuff, and these are the guys that sit there. They freeze, and they're not supposed to smile or jack shit. All right. They're trying to find a way to get him to smile. Peggy tells the guard that Al's a shoe salesman. Everybody else there laughs except for the guard. Then Peggy decides to try something interesting. She asks Al to take off one of his shoes, put the shoe in front of the guard, and Al says, "He's not smiling. He will be when I take the shoe away." She takes the shoe away, and the guard not only smiles, but collapses straight to the ground. Okay? So they did their job. We then head over to Speaker's Corner, okay, where Winston says that every blatant idiot who wants to get anything off their chest comes out and speaks. And guess who's talking? It's Al. How much he hates marriage, much he hates the French, and all that shit. And he winds up leading the men into a, whoa, women, I don't like them. And of course, you have some wives that are taking offense to that and punch their husbands in the chest. Oh, and by the way, am I alone here in hating the French? No! We then head over to Wentworth Arms, okay, where Marcy and Jefferson are running from the law. Okay? Apparently, they decided to do it. Jefferson, being the criminal that he is, decided to engage in a little counterfeiting of his own. Okay? As God is my witness, I swore that Michael Caine was on the £5 note. That's the Queen! Okay? They're trying to, so now they're all screwy. They have no money. They have nowhere to stay. They have no food. Now they're trying to find ways to come up with some money to, in order to survive in London. So Jefferson basically has Marcy pose uh, as a cardboard cutout with a sign that says, "Take a picture with an American cutout for £5" or something like that. Then we see the Bundys. They're walking along this river. Okay, I believe it's the River Thames or the Thames River or well, however you say it. Okay, and I do apologize to all you British listeners. Okay, we're gonna say Thames. Okay, because I don't know what because that's the name of the river, the major river that flows through London. Okay, so they're walking along the Thames, and they're carrying all these British souvenirs that came out of Winston's pocket because, after all, it's all expenses paid. And they don't even want it, so they throw it in the garbage. Okay? Winston is so insistent on getting the Bundys to Lower Uncton, but not so fast. The Bundys still want to sightsee in London, but they're tired. They recommend the finest hotel accommodations in London. Igor recommends the Savoy. So Al says, the Savoy it is. Winston's very hesitant because he wants to get them to Lower Uncton. He wants to get them into. He recommends this little dungeon hotel in Lower Uncton. And Igor basically tells Winston, "I've never been to Savoy. I want to see the Savoy. Screw you, Winston." So they wind up going to the Savoy. Uhowever, as they're walking along, we come across two other guys who are from Upper Uncton. Okay, Upper Uncton has built their Upper Uncton, they built their town and their economy as a tourist attraction for Lower Uncton's eternal darkness. Okay, come see our ugly sister in Lower Uncton. Okay, if the Bundys find their way to Lower Uncton and get killed there, then they lose their tourist attraction. Okay, so they must insist on making sure that the Bundys do not make it to Lower Uncton and plan on taking the Bundys out while they're still in London. Okay? They insist on they'll never leave London alive. We then get a free shot of Buckingham. I don't know if it's Buckingham. It's Parliament and Big Ben in the background along the River Thames with "to be continued." That is the end of part one, and there is no audience applaud. Okay? Because we are finishing part one off on a dramatic note. Okay? Let's go through a few quick notes regarding part one before we move into part two, shall we? All right, so the Bundys arrive at the airport. In the background, there's a person holding a sign that says Levitt. Another person has a sign that says Moyer. The references to the show's creators, Ron Levitt and Michael Moyer, who also wrote the episode. There is also a third but obscure sign for Anderson in reference to John Maxwell Anderson, who was another Married Children producer. Michael Moyer and Ron Levitt provide their own voices in this episode as a couple of dogs near Buck's cage where he's at the dog pound singing "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen." That's the song that we hear periodically throughout the show. Throughout the entire series, that is. While Al asks Bud to hurry up and take a picture of him and the rest of the Bundys, a couple walks by and points out that Al is a shoe salesman before walking away and laughing at him. That is Stacy Lipp and Larry Jacobson, who are both writers for the show. Hairstylist Dottie McGowan is seen behind the Bundys when they try to get the Queen's Guard to crack. Al mentions that he and Bud would dress as Hare Krishnas and go to the airport begging for spare change. Okay? This is the first time that we see them at the airport not dressed like that. Jefferson also reveals to Marcy that Marcy once forgot to record an episode of Full House for him, and he then sulked about it. Okay? Cultural references. All right. On the airplane ride to England, pilot announces over the speakers for Al to put his shoes back on as he's choking to death. Al then comments, "Oh, please. They show us the movie Dutch and they think I stink." Ed O'Neill actually starred in this movie, released in May of 1991, and was considered a total flop due to poor reviews and earning less than $5 million on a $17 million budget during its theatrical run. We would also see another reference to Dutch in the season 9 episode Dial Beaver Virgin, which is another episode that is on my list to review. And if you would like Mr. Wildcat to review that episode sooner than later, please leave a request in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to get that to you. Al keeps forgetting Winston's name and refers to him to every cigarette brand on the face of the earth. Okay, so Winston is a name of a brand of cigarettes. Okay, which is where all these other cigarette references come into play. So Winston. So in addition to Winston, Al refers to this guy as Marlboro, Lucky Strike, Camels, Benson, and Hedges. Okay, my store used to sell tobacco products, and thankfully we do not anymore. Largely in part because of the asshole customers that we would attract. All right, mainly from businesses. All right, if we kept selling tobacco, I would have left the company a long time ago because I would have been stuck serving to these bastards. Jefferson mentions Michael Caine, a British actor best known for his Cockney accent. His notable film roles include Get Carter, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and in recent times Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy as Alfred Pennyworth. Okay, Michael Caine would also be referenced in season 10's Kiss of the Coffee Woman, where Marcy's in the shoe store saying, "Well, Bud is selling maps to stars who are making horror public appearances." By the way, did you know that Michael Caine is down at Orange Julius as we speak? So Michael Caine, he as of September 2022, is still alive today. At the age of 89, he will be 90 on March 14th of 2023. A wide variety of films, including that. The one film I definitely do. There's two films I definitely remember Michael Caine in. So like, the first one was the 1992 film Muppet Christmas Carol. Okay, it apparently was the last project that Jim Henson ever worked on. He unfortunately passed away during the film's production, and the film actually paid tribute to Jim Henson as a general tribute to that. Michael Caine wound up playing Ebenezer Scrooge. Okay, he also played Austin Powers' father in the third Austin Powers film, Austin Powers in Goldmember. Okay, which turns out that Austin Powers and Doctor Evil, who are nemesis against each other, it turns out that the two are actual brothers. All right, and that's how we find out about that because Michael Caine, his character winds up coveting both Austin and Doctor Evil. Okay. Any other episodes we should see? Oh yeah, there's one more thing we want to bring up. Kelly doesn't seem to know about England at first when she's introduced to about the England trip, but makes three notable British references: poet and writer William Shakespeare, Prime Minister and Member of Parliament Winston Churchill, actor comedian Benny Hill. Winston Churchill coincidentally was the first he was the Prime Minister of Canada. Oh no. Can't. My apologies. Prime Minister of Great Britain when Queen Elizabeth II took over the Queen's role. And Benny Hill is a very famous comedian. He's see. He had a comedy show in Britain called The Benny Hill Show. Often featured sped up sequence where the characters would chase each other on screen as yakety sax played over the scene. Don't please don't have me sing anymore. This is referenced in the season 7 episode. It doesn't get any better than this, when Marcy and Jefferson are yelling and chasing Ale all over the cabin. Okay? And while we see the different landmarks of Britain, basically is, let's see, we're seeing Rule Britannia. Da 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 da. Don't have me sing any more of that, please. Filmed on location at the Bundy residence, Lower Uncton, Dog Kennel, Heathrow Airport, London, Hyde Park, and the Post side of town, is what they basically say. And basically, airport. Although Lower Uncton has not seen sunlight for 4 centuries by the curse, the town did not go into a deep freeze. Very weird. Another one thing I want to make up about this is that since Al and Bud are the only male Bundys said to be alive, that would probably mean that the other male Bundys from the episode "And Baby Makes Money" were killed in England at some point within the span of less than 2 years, which would be a rather impossible task. So there is a very difficult there. So put this into mind when we go into our rating at the end of this episode, 3-part episode. Okay. We are running out of time, so we're going to have to stop with the trivia and we're going to start digging into part 2. Okay? Part 2 was filmed between March 30th and April 17th of 1992 and aired on May 10th, 1992. All right, so this is called England Show Part 2. And it was also known as Wasting the Company's Money. That was the working title for this episode as well. So we start off with a recap from the first part, and then we also we carry over to we leave off where part one. We start where part one left off, in which the Bundys are enjoying room service at the Savoy Hotel the very next morning. Winston is getting very anxious. He's getting pissed off at the same time. And this is where the all expense paid is really starting to invigorate him. Okay? They said all expense paid because they're trying to lure the Bundys to England so they can kill them. Plus, they were not expecting them to stay alive this long. Their original plan was to get the Bundys in the car at the airport and take them straight to Lower Uncton and kill them on sight. They were not expecting all this sightseeing, all this tourism, all this high scale hotels. And apparently, it looks like that the Bundys had spent £5,000 of Winston's money on this one night at the Savoy Hotel. All expenses paid, of course. So then we get a visit from a guy. He's one of the assassins from Upper Uncton, posing as room service. Comes in with this fancy dessert called a bomb. Okay, very fancy dessert. All right, underneath the table covers is a bomb. All right, that is fusing very slowly, and he basically insists that the Bundys eat it very slowly. All right. And then we get a visit from Marcy and Jefferson, who find out that the Bundys are staying at the Savoy Hotel. So they go to the Savoy. They hop on the elevator in order to get their luggage back from the Bundys. And just as they're about to do it, um, the Upper Uncton assassin is gets the tray back before it explodes. He's trying to find a way to dispose of it before he gets blown up, so he throws it into the elevator, which is currently housing Marcy and Jefferson. The elevator closes and the whole elevator blows up. We see the elevator open back up. Marcy and Jefferson are complete shred. All right. So then we get a couple references here. So first off, we see Al asks Winston for a copy of Biggins magazine. Okay, it's Mary Children's version of Playboy. Okay, for those of you who do not know what we're talking about. Now in England, they do not call them Biggins. They call them booby racks. And then and then Kelly basically, no, Peggy, okay. Peg then says, "We have to get presents for everybody back at home, so let's loot something valuable." They wind up grabbing everything that they can, and they wind up dropping some antique furniture, which is unfortunately going to come out of Winston's pocket, because after all, he's the one who's paying for this hotel, as well as the room service that they wind up ordering. Now, this original thing, we'll get to this during our trivia for part two, but basically, this line right here was cut out of its original broadcast, but was reinserted back in during the reruns and the DVD releases. And the reason why they originally cut this out is because originally this episode originally aired shortly after the LA riots, and the LA riots were still on everybody's mind. It was fresh in everybody's minds, and they considered it to be in bad taste, even for a show like Married Children. For those of you not familiar with the LA riots, basically it was a series. Uh, LA, $25 billion worth of damage was done in the city of LA. Like, the city of LA wound up going ablaze after. Um, in 1991, there was a black guy named Rodney King who was caught on camera being beaten and abused by LAPD. And basically, not to get political and stuff, but basically, he was caught. Rodney King was caught on video being beaten up by the LAPD. The video was shown in court, and the LAPD officers who were involved with the beating, they were all acquitted. And all of these civilians in LA, particularly blacks and low-income people, they were so pissed off with the verdict that they basically they started setting fire to the whole city of LA. And okay, looting stores, beating people to a bloody pulp. LAPD decided to say, "Guys are on your own. Let it burn." Because at that point, they did not want to look like the bad guys. Ring a bell, guys? That George Floyd riots in 2020, that Black Lives Matter shit. Let's move on, shall we? All right. So basically, we then go back. After they're done looting the hotel and getting ready to go, the Bundys go on vacation. They wind up going on. The Bundys wind up going sightseeing again throughout London. Their first scene is during, I believe it's Hyde Park, if you know what I'm saying. Al decides to take his feet off, take off his shoes and socks, and put his feet inside the pond. Okay. Also hiding behind the bushes in the pond in a scuba diving outfit is another assassin from Upper Uncton who is trying to kill the Bundys while they're in the park. And guess what? Al puts his feet in the water to wash it off. The water gets so contaminated, it literally kills every fish in the pond comes belly up on top of the water. Al literally killed all the fish in the pond. He gets out of the pond, runs over to Kelly and the kids, says, "Kill the fish, let's go." And who do we? And we also see that assassin in the scuba diving outfit. He's floating along too with the dead fish, but he's not dead. He's just violently ill because he's been swimming around in very nasty water. Okay. We then head over to London Dungeons. Okay. In which is we will probably get into that during the trivia factor, but basically there's a bunch of like scary attractions, I believe. So let's see if I can. London Dungeons. Come on. All right. London Dungeons is a real tourist attraction in South Bank. It features wax figures depicting historical events in glory detail. Okay, it's basically what it is. Now, we don't see any wax figures in this museum, but we do see a family They're wind up seeing this horror attraction. They turn around, they see the bunnies, and they scream and run away. Say, "We're just Americans. What's the matter with them? Maybe they're French." They then come walking across, and we find like that same assassin from Upper Uncton that was in the pond. Okay, we see him dressed up as Jack the Ripper. He attempts to stab Bud from behind, but Bud turns around and looks and says, "Hey, it's Jack the Ripper." And Kelly notices that he's moving. And then Al comes over and says, "Oh, come on." Okay, he basically swings his neck back and forth. "Come on. He's not alive. If he was, I would have just broken this guy's neck." And then the guy winds up collapsing to the ground. Okay. We then head over to Pool and Co. Tailor, which is an upper scale tailor shop. All right, it's a clothing shop for fancy individuals. Okay, Al is there to get himself a fancy suit, and Bud winds up getting a fancy suit too. Now, basically, Bundy, it is an actual gentleman's bespoke tailor. It has been family owned and run since 1806, and historically known as the creator of the dinner jacket. Okay, customers from Pool and Co. Tailor include the British royal family as well as royalty from other countries. And in 1886, a James Potter from the Tuxedo Club purchased a dinner jacket from Pool and Company. He then brought it back to America, and in the United States, the dinner jacket is known as the tuxedo. So all of you guys that see you see all those Hollywood freaks from the Oscars dressed up in those fancy tuxedos. You know where those came from. Or anybody who attends like one of those fancy um, White House events, fancy dinners, etc., etc., um, millionaire parties and stuff. You know where this all comes from. So basically, we see Al and Bud getting fitted into their new uniform, new outfits, while we're listening to it's in a montage listening to the song "I'm Too Sexy" by Right Said Fred. I'm too sexy for my blank, too sexy for my blank, la 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 la. Now that song also came out in 1992, and it turns out to be a one-hit wonder for Right Said Fred. It's a British band, by the way, so that makes it even more appropriate. And this, like I said before, it was a one-hit wonder for Right Said Fred because had they never had a hit before this, and they never had another hit after this. It's the only song they actually had a song with. Okay, but basically, while we're in the montage, we also see the Bundy family. They grab this trunk. They load it up with everything in the tailor shop that they can get their hands on, and it's being addressed to the Bundy household on Jeopardy Lane in Chicago, USA. And all of this, guess what? Another 5,000 pounds. Okay. Winston, he's basically on the phone saying, "I've never seen anything like this. You need to get some more money up here now." They wind up selling, they wind up selling Winston's farm for $5,000, all of which wind up going to the bill for the tailor shop. Okay. By this point, the Bundys are ready to go to Lower Uncton. Kelly, on the other hand, plans on staying in London. She's a one-horse city girl. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. But basically, she stays in London. She has a pumpkin in the car that is used to be her disguise. Okay, so they drive to Lower Uncton. It's still daytime, of course, but it's pitch dark in Lower Uncton. They wind up heading into this castle. Basically, the Bundy family, due to a couple of hiccups with the beheading, they cannot lynch the Bundy males until the following day. So while Al and Peg are in one room, they're being praised. You have these kids that come in wanting to have their pictures taken with Al, who's about to be killed. Al doesn't seem to know what the hell's going on. And then we also have Bud in his room. His room turns out to be haunted. And basically, let's see, all of these Bundy ancestors, they come into Bud in a dream saying, "Get out by morning. You will be killed. You will be killed by the morning. Get out of here while you still can." And Bud hides under the sheets in horror. We then head back to London, where we see Marcy and Jefferson now all their clothing all ripped to shreds, and basically they were apparently given 2 tickets to a theater performance by a lovely couple instead of food, lodging, or money. But basically, they're going to sit there and be warmed by attending this performance. They don't know what it's about, but they say they hear it's the longest running theater It's the longest running theater performance in London's history. So the tickets are redeemed, and what do we find? We wind up in the Red Fanny, which is technically a S&M joint. Okay, all these people walking around in adult-themed garter belts and stuff, and then we have this lady come around, recognizes the Darcys as Americans, and goes, "Bad Americans." Jefferson recognizes what this is. Must be Shakespeare. Tammy the Shrew, I believe. Then we have another male stripper comes around, played by Michael Moyer. "Would you like a drink or a spanking?" We then head to another part of London where Kelly is in this nightclub, and she's being serviced by Prince Charles. All right, now known as King Charles III. Okay, Kelly gets called out by this waiter. Kelly comes out wearing this crown. Just 1 second after she comes out, a hand pulls out of the curtain and yanks the crown off of Kelly and back. "Hey! You're not allowed to wear it out there. Only with me." The waiter says that there's somebody here to see Kelly. Kelly says, "I'm very can't see him right now. I'm very busy with the prince." But then the waiter reminds her that it's about her family. And you know how Kelly is. "I never should have had parents." So she goes to see this mysterious guy, and just as Kelly's about to head over to see this guy, Princess Diana comes out of nowhere and heads into this special booth with Prince Charles and brutally attacks him, which is paying homage to their ugly divorce in 1992. Now we thought, for the longest time, I thought that she was going in there to make hot monkey love to Prince Charles. No, she's brutally abusing him. We'll get that in just a moment. So it turns out to be one of these assassins from Upper Uncton, okay, who has found out that the Bundys are now in Lower Uncton, and they're trying to do everything they can to get the Bundys out of there. So basically, she warns Kelly that the family is in danger of death, and only her can save the family. So she tells them to take the Bundy family out of Lower Uncton and bring them up to Upper Uncton for that they will be safe. So Kelly leaves the nightclub. She's running around the streets of London in a montage music theme of Lassie. Okay, the Lassie theme is being played. She's running around the streets of London. Nobody seems to know where Lower Uncton is, and she has this one guy who's willing to talk to her, but says something dirty or naughty, and technically and apparently offensive, as Kelly punches the guy in the face. And then she heads off. So we wind up seeing a montage of different things. Like she apparently has left London by this point. Okay, we then see Kelly in India with the Taj Mahal in the background. Very appropriate, considering the fact that India used to be a British colony until 1948. I recommend the 1982 Best Picture Gandhi. Okay, if you guys want to know more about that. We then see Kelly heading in the right direction because she's in the African desert in Egypt with the Egyptian pyramids in the background. Then we see her heading closer to London in Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the background. She's apparently walking along the street, and she's about to get hit by a truck, so she's running for her life. Apparently, she runs so far she winds up back in the when she winds up in the dinosaur era. That, oh shit, I gone too far. Then she turns back. We then finish up part two with the announcer wrapping up and doing the transition for part three. So, will Kelly ever find her family? Will the male Bundys survive? Was Brooklyn Bridge ever worthy of an Emmy? We will answer two of these questions next week on Married with Children. And that is the end of part two. Okay? We're almost there, guys. So let's go through some trivia. So let's see. 1 second, guys. I'm a little thirsty here. The three episodes are set in England. The working title for this episode, for part two, was called England Show 2, Wasting the Company's Money. Winston is referred to, as with the previous episode, Winston is referred to by other cigarette brands or elements. In this episode, he's known as, he calls Winston Salem and Menthol. Although Al does actually call him Winston while the Bundys are at the London dungeon. Savoy Hotel, which the Bundys started off with, it is a real luxury hotel located in central London. I'm pretty sure it's expensive. Let's take a quick second here. We don't have much time, but let's see exactly how much a night at the Savoy would currently cost. Ooh, it's let's see. It is a luxurious five-star hotel. Um, wow, it actually does. The Savoy you see on Married Children, it actually that is what the Savoy actually looks like. Believe it or not, it's the only five-star hotel on the river. How much would it cost here? Let's see. If we're going to go to let's see if there's let's do the Savoy. Let's do this one right here because apparently it is. Oh dear, 10,475 pounds. Okay, let's see. How much do these actually cost? Okay, as a typical Savoy suite would cost 10,475 pounds. A superior queen room, 635 pounds. 875 pounds. Okay. I would probably say, okay, they would range anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand British pounds per night. That's as of 2022. It's like it's expensive, right? The 5,000 pound price that had been mentioned at the beginning of the episode is most likely it would make sense for it. Okay, when you do like the suite and the room service and stuff, it would make sense for it to come up to 5,000 pounds. Okay, for one night. So let's go back to that. So the London Dungeon we were talked about. Poole and Co. Taylor we talked about. Um, talked about Michael Moyer playing the male stripper in the club. Director Gary Cohen appears as a man on the street. The guy that Kelly punches out on the street towards the end of the episode, that was director Jerry Cohen. All right. We'd already talked about this one, but then the scene was cut from original airing, later shown in syndication. Peggy tells the family to loot the hotel for souvenirs. At the time of the original broadcast, the 92 LA riots were still in the public's consciousness, and any references to looting were considered to be in bad taste even for married children. Alright, so basically, Mark Addy, who plays the Lower Uncton gallows builder, he later came to international attention as one of the night stars of the 1997 film The Full Monty, as well as the first season of Games of Thrones. There is a couple of Kellyisms. You have Aviar douche, which she says it was used instead of Aphrodite, which is Italian for goodbye. She also says one horse town instead of one horse town. I must be running like the stocking instead of I must run like the wind. All right. So then she see voiceover at the end asks if Brooklyn Bridge is worthy of an Emmy. It's basically a CBS television show based on the life of a Jewish American family during the 50s in Brooklyn, New York. It was nominated for an Emmy in Outstanding Television Series in 1992 after only one season. It also might be poking fun at the fact that Married Children has never been nominated for an Emmy in Outstanding Television Comedy, even though it has been on television longer than Brooklyn Bridge. All right. See. Anything else here? Oh, the bomb, okay, which is the dessert that you see in the beginning of the episode. It is identical to the scene in the James Bond movie Diamonds Are Forever, where a waiter brings him a dish named Bomb Surprise, which was a bomb hidden under a fake cake underneath a food cart. Marcy and Jefferson enter the red fanny and lady called Bad Americans. Jefferson tells her that the Taming of the Shrew may be the name of the play. It is actually written by English writer William Shakespeare. Oh, here, the last thing we're going to go into before we head into part three. At the nightclub, Kelly is revealed to be in a private booth where Charles, Prince of Wales, warns her that she can't wear the crown without him present as she exits. Afterwards, his then wife, Diana, Prince of Wales, walks in and attacks him. This is in reference to the couple separating in 1992 after it was revealed that he had been having an extramarital affair, claiming that the marriage had been broken down 5 years after their televised wedding in 1981. And speaking of that wedding, that was a worldwide, okay, that was seen worldwide. And my mother and my older sister, who was only 5 years old at the time, they wanted being two, they were amongst two of the viewers of that wedding. And one thing I will definitely add here is that back around this time, my father was working overnights at the sheriff's department, um, and basically he would work overnights and he would sleep during the day. In order for my father to get some sleep, my mother and my sister would head over to my grandparents' house, um, about 10 miles down the road, and they would basically sit. They would play on the farm. They would watch TV and anything. They would also get to do some extra stuff with grandma and grandpa. Okay, so that's all we have for part two. Let's jump into part three. Get into this as quickly as we can. So part three, we basically picks up with the Bundys showing up for a ceremony in front of the castle in Lower Uncton. There's nooses aboard. They just want Bud and Al up on the stage, and they think that they're going to be um, honored with something. Bud sees the nooses and he feels that he's going to be that they're about to get killed. Kelly, on the other hand, shows up in Lower Uncton. She winds up knocking out one of the female spectators and takes over and puts on her clothing as a disguise. And as the town's about to lynch Al and Bud, Kelly hops on this trailer with horses, of course, comes running up to the cage where Al and Bud they jump on top of the carriage while Peggy is lagging from behind, and the town goes running after the Bundys. Apparently, the carriage breaks for one reason or another, and the Bundys are seen walking down this road in the dark, and the town has basically caught up to the Bundys, so they're starting to run, and they wind up coming to this mysterious boundary between Lower and Upper Uncton. Kelly had told the Bundys that this guy had told her to bring the Bundys here. They're sitting along the boundary trying to figure out what to do with these guys, what to do with the Bundy family. And after a lengthy discussion, they basically decide Igor turns out to be the last remaining ancestor of the woman that Seamus McBundy insulted in 1653. He wants revenge. So he challenges Al to a joust. And if Igor wins, then they get to have the joust. Then they get to kill the Bundys in Lower Uncton. And if Al wins, they get to be killed on Upper Uncton. Okay? Meanwhile, back at the Red Fanny, Marcy is basically sitting there thanking everybody for a wonderful time. She apparently had wired her mother for some money back in the States, but unfortunately the Red Fanny was the only place, well, it was the only address that she had to give her. So until the money comes out, okay, so she asks her money for some money so they can get some food and some reasonable lodgings, and they can finish their vacation with peace. And basically, it's going to take it could take up to a couple hours for it to show up. So they're trying to figure out what to do, and that lady stripper from the previous episode. All right, like she recommend like when they do get the money, they recommend this restaurant called the Whip Puppy. But until the money shows up, she sits on another game of Bad, Amer- Bad Americans? Bad Americans. when I. There is one quick comment I'm going to add here. Comedy Central, they aired this short-lived TV show. It was just so bizarre. Ugly Americans. This is what comes to mind whenever I whenever I see this episode with the Bad Americans result. All right. So then Igor comes out of the. Okay. We wind up seeing Igor in his joust uniform, and apparently Al does not know exactly what a joust is. So he's dressing up in his Polk football uniform and his helmet. Totally unprepared for this event. Okay. They have both Upper and Lower Uncton. They decide to hold this event, this joust, in Upper Uncton, where the sun is clearly bright, because they plan on shooting a video for this, and they can get the best lighting in Upper Uncton. They have all these different conscores. They have T-shirts. They have concessions. They have a video they're preparing for. All this money is going to come in and be split amongst the two communities once the Bundys are killed. So they do the joust. And basically, Igor's on a horse with a sword and shield, while Al is sitting there running around with nowhere to go. Al winds up taking his shoe off and showing it in front of the horse. The horse stops he can't stand the smell. Igor gets fallen off as a result, and basically is throwing a sword and a shield to fight Al Bundy, and Al is only given a rubber shield that says "Kill Al Bundy." Okay, no sword, of course. Igor decides to knock Al around a little bit, and just as he's about to give him the final blow, he says, "Next time you decide to next time you play a man's sport, wear a man's uniform." And and Al's response is, "The next time you insult an American, make sure you didn't play high school football." Or in my case, next time you decide to piss off a Wildcat or Republican, make sure he's not armed and extremely dangerous. So Al kicks Igor in the nuts. He's unconscious. Al gets up, and he decides to take advantage of it by knocking the hell out of Igor to the ground, completely unconscious by this point. And just so we know, as Al knocks Igor out, the darkness, the curse from Lower Uncton has ended. Okay? The sun is, for the first time in 339 years, is coming up over Lower Uncton. You can definitely tell. No crops. What they have no crops because they've had no sunlight to grow the crops. Okay? The curse must have been ended when Al took out Igor. Of course, Lower Uncton's curse has ended. The curse for the Bundys remains. Okay? And guess what? Both Upper and Lower Uncton are extremely pissed now. Lower Uncton, while their curse has been lifted, they have no crops. They have no resources. They're literally, and they literally spent every fucking dime to end the curse and assassinate Bud and Al. Upper Uncton is pissed off too because they've lost their tourist attraction, which is going to make Upper and Lower Uncton flat broke. They can't even sell a fucking video that they just made. So guess what? As payback for everything, they decide to go after the Bundys anyway. Not just Bud and Al, but the whole family. As soon as they decide to charge after the Bundys, Peggy goes, vacation's over. And all four of them are running away in a helicopter. We see a helicopter shot of the Bundys running away from the mob. They're running back to London, of course. Peggy says, "Thank your father, kids." "Thanks, Dad." Probably my most favorite part of that whole that third part of the episode. Then we head back to the London's Heathrow Airport. Apparently, the Bundys had. This doesn't make sense. They managed to find. Now I don't know if they. And I'm not sure if their luggage was back at the Savoy in London, or if it was at the castle in Lower Uncton. They somehow managed to get their luggage back. All right. And miraculously, Marcy and Jefferson have luggage of their own. So they make it to the security checkpoint where the Bundys and the Darcys, they reunite once again. And they basically, Peggy asks how their trip was, and Jefferson and Marcy basically say how they took in a lot of theater. They run to the. Marcy walks through the metal detector. It's going off. The airport security, they confiscate the luggage, and guess what's in there? A whole bunch of adult garter whole bunch of souvenirs from that S&M theater. Oh my God! Somebody must have mixed our luggage with a whole bunch of uncruel punishment. But instead of holding these people up, I'd be happy to pay the duty. So basically, the Darcys then grab the luggage and they run off in shame. Peggy then heads up to the security guard, who asks Peggy, "Do you have anything to declare?" "Yes, my husband is an idiot." And then the Bundys are good to go. Guess what? There's no Al. All right. Peggy, Kelly, and Bud are the only three Bundys at the airport. Al's missing. And apparently he had gone through security. They confiscated his luggage and they found a hotel. They found a towel from the Savoy. All right. And you know what the punishment is? He's basically in prison. All right. All right. We'll talk about that in just a moment, okay? But basically, We see Al on chains with another guy in chains in this tower dungeon somewhere. Al asks the guy what he's in for. He stole an ashtray from the Ritz. Al confesses that he stole a towel from the Savoy. And after finding out that they are served bread and water in prison, Al confesses it's the best vacation he's ever had. And that ends the three-parter. Okay? Let's quickly dig into the trivia for part 3, and then we will dig into my rating for this three-parter. Okay? The 3 episodes are set in England. The working title for part 3 was England Show 3, We're Spending as Fast as He Can. Okay? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, this third part was recorded on April 17th, 1992, and originally aired on May 17th. And this third parter is the official end to season 6. These 3 episodes, none of them aired together. They aired in 3 separate weeks. Okay. Peggy reveals that Al's minimum wage job is $3.25 an hour. Al may have broken the curse in Lower Uncton, but the curse still lives on with the Bundys. Okay. After Igor demonstrates his fighting skills in front of Bud and then stares him down while growling, Bud faints and Kelly calls him Tiny Toon in reference to the cartoon series Tiny Toon's Adventures. Okay, kind of a kid's version of Bugs Bunny. I remember watching that when I was a kid. I thought it was pretty cool, but now I find a hard time trying to watch it for some reason. Mayor Fishaw, who was the mayor of Lower Uncton, "Let's get ready to rumble," is a catchphrase made popular in boxing by announcer Michael Buffer. Let's get ready to rumble. Afterward, he calls the match between Al and Igor the Thumping in Lower Uncton, which likely is a play on the boxing match Thrilla in Manila. After Igor knocks him down, Al tells him, "Okay, enough rope-a-dope." It's strategy used in boxing where a fighter makes his opponent fatigue himself out by throwing punches while the first fighter remains on the defense, sometimes clinging onto the ropes of the ring. Once the opponent shows signs of fatigue, the fighter then moves in and is able to strike out with full power. Al's speech includes his speech on stage in Lower Uncton, a variation of the phrase, "Today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth," is considered being replaced with the word "feel." It is a reference to the one given by Lou Gehrig in 1939, who had played with the New York Yankees. Let's we have a quick second here, so I want to get this done as quickly as possible. I have a football game to go to. Lou Gehrig, born June 19th, 1903, died June 2nd, 1941, played his entire career from 1923 to 1939 with the New York Yankees. Okay. Oh shit! I just exited out of that, so let's go back here. Okay. He's best known as one of baseball's Iron Men as he played 2,130 consecutive games between June 21st, 1925 and April 30th, 1939, which was his final game ever. His streak was eventually broken by Cal Ripken Jr., who played 2,632 games between May 30th, 1982 and September 20th, 1998. And Cal Ripken Jr., he played his entire career with the Baltimore Orioles. All right. First played from August 10th, 1981 through August 6th of 2001. So he played 21 seasons with the Baltimore Orioles. Okay. While Al is getting ready to prepare for the joust, put on the uniform and stuff, we hear Al's anthem "Bad to the Bone" by George Thorogood and the Destroyers. This is a song we hear repeatedly throughout the series. Okay. One thing that you may or may not consider, I'll have to go back and look at this myself, but it says on here, during the medieval joust, Al's football jersey changed from 33 to 27 and back to 33. Marcy decides to play bad Americans again while waiting for the money to be wired to them. She and Jefferson walk back to the dance area from the previous episode. Let's see. Never explained how or why Al would have his complete football uniform with him in England in the first place, considering that he did not know that he was going to participate in the Johnston event until later in the trip. It is likely that Al thought he was going to be presented to the Queen. In the first part of the trilogy, it is declared that Al will be the guest of honor at an acquainted Elizabethan expiration ceremony. Okay? A fancy way of saying death penalty for the Bundys. Let's see. I think that's going to be it for trivia for part 3. So now I'm going to dig into my official review for the England show, parts 1, 2, and 3 all together. Okay? I'm going to read to you exactly, okay? I'm going to read to you exactly what I left on the comment section of the Married Children Podcast YouTube video for England show part 3. All right? Because I pretty much summarized it word for word of what I'm about to say. All right? The three-parter was okay, but it was not the best. It would have done better as a Married with Children motion picture. But the budget and fan base was not strong enough to go that route, so we wound up getting stuck with this. Basically, what that means is you see like how the Simpsons they got their own movie. You had like a few of these other shows they got their own motion picture and stuff. Well, this would have been more appropriate as one of those movies and stuff. But the thing is, the viewership was not high enough. The budget and the demand and the viewership of typical Married Children was not strong enough to make this worthwhile. All right, quite honestly, because in order to make the budget, it costs a lot of money to make a motion picture. It costs even more money to distribute it, and knowing how the ratings are, typical ratings are for a show like Married Children, you likely would not have gotten your money back. So that's why we want to get stuck with this as a three-parter on the show versus a motion picture. Okay. I do appreciate the show trying something different by taking the show on the road and trying some new characters with an English base. However, the storyline was not strong enough for me to give a reason to watch this over and over and over again in a way which I would watch other episodes. The first part was the best as it introduced the situation and hyped up the episode. The second one didn't really do much except extend the number of places the Bundys and Darcy's visit. Third part was supposed to wrap up the trip and wrap up the storyline, but it didn't really go anywhere, and the ending was very awkward. All right. This episode, the Marriage Children podcast. When they reviewed this episode, they mentioned that it was a one cam. They wound up using a one camera sequence. Like instead of using multiple cameras scattered throughout the set, they used one camera, and they wound up editing it to look like a typical movie or a TV show. And of course, there's no live audience, so the laughing track that you see throughout the three-parter is actually they wind up taking the show back to the States. They showed it in front of an audience, and they wind up recording the laughter or something like that. Either that, or they must have added in some kind of canned laughter into these episodes. So it just was not that good, and I am going to deduct. They tried their best on a new concept, but it did not deliver. Is probably the best way I'm going to say. My most favorite part of the entire three-parter was at the end of season. It was at the end of part 2. Marcy and Jefferson find themselves in an S&M joint. The lady goes bad Americans, while Michael Moyer offers the Darcys a drink or a spanking. Another thing I liked, which I did not mention in my Marriage Children podcast review, was another thing I liked was when the Bundys were running from the mob in Lower Upper Uncton towards the end of part 3. Thank you, Father Kids. Thanks, Dad. We see that quite often throughout the show. And they basically did mention that I think Luigi, who at the time was just a guest host on the Married Children podcast, he had the honor, he was invited to review this three-part episode with the typical Married Children podcast team, Alex and Jamie and I think it was Dan or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. but basically, they had mentioned that that this "Thank Your Father, Kids, Thanks Dad" was mentioned in a vacation movie, partially the European Vacation from 1985. I'll have to go back and I don't recall watching this, but I'll have to go back and see it. And if I do find it, I will put the link in my description to this video, and I'll let you guys check it out. Okay. Now, when you consider everything together, all right, um, trying something new, whether or not this was good or not, when you compare it to the other episodes, not really that good, and it went a little longer than expected, but pretty interesting to say the very least. This three-parter for the England show is going to get a 3 out of 5. All right? Pretty much the same rating that the Married Children podcast team had given for this review as well. Okay? That is all we have for today. Mr. Wildcat has to get going because there's a football game down the street. We are hosting Mississippi State this week, where the Wildcats are, where even though we're underdogs, we're going to teach these bastards that this is Wildcat country and you do not fuck around with us. Okay? Until the next time we meet, I'm Mr. Wildcat, reminding each and every one of you to be good, be careful, and behave. God save the Queen. God save the righteous Queen. God save our noble Queen. God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.